Hey, welcome back to the Backyard Professor videos. I'm used to saying the Backyard Professor chess videos, but I don't know what to call these videos where I talk about philosophy and symbolism and mathematics and religion and history. And also I'll just say welcome to the Backyard Professor, intellectual videos? I don't even know if I'm intellectual enough to claim to make intellectual videos, but I want to show you a current project that I'm involved in, and I will give you guys some of the highlights of my research, and then I will post my research on a message board, and I'll let you know where that's at. Hopefully I'm going to be able to finish this thing before Christmas. I'm not so sure, however. I've found a lot of sources on this subject. What I want to do is talk about the symbolism of trees. And I figure, this is actually pretty good because the season is Christmas and Christmas tree. The more I looked, the more I discovered of how deep and far and wide this theme of tree. My suspicion is because, virtually the world over there are trees everywhere. And trees are one of the most magnificent things on our planet, really. I've seen the redwoods in California, and they are simply staggering. They're breathtaking. You can't even describe them. They make all of the trees look like mere toothpicks. They are fantastic. Pine trees. I've seen great big huge forests of deciduous quaking-ass while I'm hunting, and trees. There is something about trees. Well, I began looking at this symbolism. And you go, what's to symbolize with the tree? It will shock you. First, I want to show you something that's shocking me, so hang on. As I have been looking through my text, you can see stacks of books there and there, there and there, and there and there. As I have been looking into information for my research into trees, there's another stack, 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 there. Over here on my table, this table was empty 2 days ago. A lot of my scholarly sources. Books, 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 stacks of books, stacks of books, stacks of books, stacks of books. All because I want to study the symbolism of trees. And in 2 days looking, I have over 100 sources dealing with the philosophical, spiritual, religious, intellectual, symbolic aspects of trees. It's absolutely mind-boggling. What I want to do for right now is just basically, I've selected 4 of my well over 100 sources on this magnificent subject. What I'd like to do is just share a couple of the quick ideas on the symbolism of the tree from various different cultures and how they interpret the meaning of trees for them. And it's just dynamic. It's so dynamic I can't even find it. Isn't that typical? Come on, dude. Okay. Here we go, here we go. No, that's not it. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Okay. When who hasn't as a kid climbed a tree, right? And there is just something in us that ties us to trees. We had a great big pine tree. I mean, the thing was 100 feet tall easily. And it had those limbs, those fantastic limbs, come right down to the ground. And we kids, we could climb all the way up into the top of that tree and sit. And while you're sitting, the wind would blow. And it would sway you because of your extra weight. And it was absolutely awesome, man. You could see a bird's eye view out across the world. And it was spectacular to do. That theme, I suppose, Carl Jung, the psychologist, would say it's an archetypal feeling, maybe? I don't know if it would be a feeling or there's something archetypal about trees. Now, this is by one of my very favorite Eastern scholars, whom I will use extensively in my research on this subject in my paper. And you will be able to see that. I will give you an address of it later when I complete it. Like I said, hopefully before Christmas. Unlikely, but I'm going to give it my best shot. This is by Anandake Kumaraswamy. And this is his book, The Door in the Sky. Kumaraswamy on Myth and Meaning. This was the Mythos series, which is an outstanding series that Princeton University Press discussed, and it was published in 1977. And it's okay. Yeah, it's a little older, but it's not out of date because he's dealing with something here that is utterly deep, profound, and broad beyond just our everyday lives. Here is one theme out of many dozens that I'm going to tie into my discussion. So we find in the literature, this is on page 11, he says, we find in the literature the conception, or rather a conception, of the world tree in which the trunk, which is also the sun pillar, the sacrificial post, and the axis mundi, and we will explain what that is. This is a very important ancient theme. What these are doing, these various symbolisms, that the tree can be the concrete physical manifestation of the intellectual symbol or the spiritual symbol, they are rising from the altar at the navel of the earth. See, this is the imagery here. From the navel of the earth, it penetrates the world door, and it branches out above the roof of the world as the non-existent, that is, the unmanifested branch that yonder kindreds know as the supernal. So this conception is directly reflected in the form of the hype-ethereal tree temples, which in India, these were originally Yaksa holy steads, and they were subsequently Buddhist temples. And in all of these, the sacred tree rises through the open temple roof and branches above it, an arrangement that is not in any way uniquely Indian. So this thing goes way back, and I'm going to show you a quick picture here in a moment of how they built these tree shrines. They built them in the shape of trees, and they had trees in the center of the shrine that grew up through the roof, and then the trees branched out and shaded the interior of the temple while they went to the temple for their holy meetings, their symbolic interpretations, their initiations and rituals. It's fantastic. We've lost something today in our boring box buildings, haven't we? Really, truly. So, connected with these conceptions, he says, we find in the literature that the ascent of the spirit is often described in terms of tree climbing. Ooh, so, hold on, because that's what we all felt as kids when we were out there playing properly, climbing the trees. giving us a new view, a different perspective. This is the ascent of the Spirit. So in this one text, as one would keep climbing up a tree by steps, he keeps ascending these worlds. So climbing rites, anciently, these are enacted in connection with the sacrificial post, the yupa, one of the most characteristic aspects of the skamba, or the axis mundi, that is the axis of the world, the pole of the world, the pillar post that joins the world to the heaven. It's called the axis mundi. And this is one of the most characteristic aspects of the skamba. And it coincides with the bridge, very interesting here, because verily the sacrificer makes it a ladder and a bridge to attain the world of heaven. And he climbs by means of steps. Now, in ancient Mesopotamia, in ancient Assyria, Babylonia, they built these ziggurats, the seven-stepped pyramids, temples, and as they ascended each step, the symbolism spectacularly was because anciently they counted 7 planets in our solar system. Now they saw these as the spheres of heaven. Each planet had its own separate sphere, right? As they wanted to ascend to heaven, they ascended the ziggurat, and each step represented a higher level in the heaven until you actually got to the top, which led you to the door in the sky. And he says this is in one end of the Milky Way. I can't remember if it's either the autumnal equinox or the spring equinox. I can't remember. I'll look it up. But there's a door in the sky where you can get, your spirit can enter that door and hence into eternal life. The symbolism is the connection of heaven and earth, the capability of ascending to the heaven. So that's just a brief idea on Kumaraswamy. I will have a lot more of this in my paper because there's a lot more exquisite, interesting detail that I really actually found really interesting. The next, hey, hold it. I told you I was going to show you the picture of the temple. It's just a line drawing, so it's not a big deal. But you can see that picture of the temple. They make it look just like a great big tree leaf, the roof. Isn't that fascinating? That's really interesting how they see, it's like Alan Watts says, he's another one of my very favorite Eastern scholars. We can't step out of Mother Nature. We are not a part from, we are a part of Mother Nature. Yeah. You're not going to step, even if you get off the Earth, the astronauts who went to the moon did not fly out of Mother Nature because we are part and parcel of it. Mother Nature, the whole universe. You don't get a step out of the universe. We are a part of that universe. They surrounded themselves with the natural beauty and power of the world, and they used nature for their symbols to achieve a higher level of, what would you call it, spirituality, consciousness, whatever you want to call it. They elevated themselves above their animal nature, which they recognized that they possessed, right? So the way, now this text, Joseph Campbell's Occidental Mythology. Let me give you another cultural hint, a nuance of the symbolism of the tree. He says, this is Occidental Mythology, the Masks of God series. It really made Joseph Campbell famous. his very first chapter, The Serpent's Bride, is just spectacular. He shows how there is in the Louvre a carved green steatite vase inscribed circa 2025 BC. So this goes way back, you know, by King Gudea of Lagash. He's dedicated to a late Sumerian manifestation of this consort of the goddess under his title, Ningizida, the Lord of the Tree of Life. And there are 2 copulating vipers entwined around a staff just like Hermes' staff, the caduceus. The ancient peoples knew about the caduceus millennia before the Greeks ever got on the scene. Very interesting. It's a universal, ancient symbol. And it has all kinds of meanings, and I will get to them also eventually. Now he goes through for pages and pages and pages. I'm just going to select a few of the highlights, he says. And here's the there's the figure of that caduceus in the middle between 2 winged figures on either side. That's quite a symbol. They call this the Serpent Lord. The serpent is also a lord of the waters. Trees, of course, the dew from the night that falls, refresh the verdure on which the cattle graze. But the serpent, too, is a lord of the waters. He's dwelling on the earth, of course, among the roots of trees, frequenting springs, marshes, and watercourses. And, of course, this is going to remind us of the Garden of Eden theme in the biblical Old Testament. And so we have the woman and the talking snake in the mythology, right? Well, the mythology is vastly older than in the Bible. The biblical text, the Old Testament itself proper, was when was it? It was actually assembled and composed as our Old Testament about 600 to 500 BC. And there are parts of it that are older, but really, truly, the literacy, the scholars have shown that the literacy in ancient Israel, not much earlier than 800 BC. Well, 900 BC, there's a smidgen of it, but 800 BC, by 700 BC, the literacy rate is really beginning to spread all over the Fertile Crescent, and by 600 BC, at least in the Israelite area, there's pretty good literacy. So, but the literacy of the illiterate peoples were the symbols. They still communicated through the symbols, and the symbols came through Mother Nature, from the earth itself. The rivers, the waters, the snakes, the trees, the rocks. Very interesting. And they put they put an all-encompassing context and meaning on the symbols, just like they did with us, and then they tied us as humanity in together with those symbols, because we're all in this thing together, and that's what we have forgotten today. We want to conquer Mother Nature. That's simply ridiculous. You don't conquer nature. You learn to live with her because she's our mother. You ruin this earth, good luck saving up for retirement. You know, we're so myopic. We're far too short-sighted. You don't need to ruin this earth to enjoy yourself, right? Now I'm preaching, sorry, but still, I mean, that's a touchy subject for me. Okay, so in an Elamite painted bowl of the late Sasanian period, now we showed you this one from 2200 BC. Now we're going to jump all the way up to 200 AD just to show you that the same theme has existed through the long concourse of millennia. And it keeps cropping up in different types of cultures, in different geographical locations. So this is really important. This particular figure I'm going to show you next, an Elamite painted bowl of the late Sasanian period. This is 200 to 600 AD, and it shows again the ancient guardian of the world tree up the trunk of which it coils. And this is the very famous world tree with the serpent curling up it. Very interesting. So this is kind of cool. Through a 3,000 year spread. And then of course there is an association of a serpent lord on the cup of immortality, and the moon is above this cup of immortality. So the motif of all antique mythologies, he said, the multiple appearance of a god simultaneously in higher and lower aspects. And there's various different, oh, here's one of the axis mundi now, and this one is a seal that was found. The symbols are in relation to the Bible. This is the first, is the elegant Syro-Hittite example, which shows the hero, the Mesopotamian hero Gilgamesh in dual manifestation. And that's a very, very famous story of Gilgamesh. There's one of the representations there. And so we get this theme back and forth. It spread through thousands of years, and it spread through, well, thousands of miles also, different ways. And I'm going to have to stand up again. Again, in this next picture, we see the idea of the Garden of Immortality as understood by the, and this is another seal, and this is the bounty of the mythic garden. All of the personages of the female sex, the two attending the tree, are identified as a dual apparition of the underworld divinity Gula Bao, whose classic counterparts, again, in the Greek pantheon, is Demeter and Persephone. So this has ramifications and it has parallels absolutely all over the ancient world, which is quite a remarkable thing. The divinity here could be represented under the female as well as the male. That's one of the main differences, he says, between some of these ancient Akkadian and Babylonian and Mesopotamian cylinder seals and various types of clay carvings. These weren't just the males having all of the power, divinity, and righteousness. No, the females were in on this completely. And he shows yet again another one. And this is an early Sumerian seal. And this is the goddess of the tree. And real interesting. See, it shows a seated figure here with horns. It shows the tree. And then look at that one figure with the snake behind him. Whoops, right there. The snake behind the figure. And there's the tree in between them. And then you can see the male with his bull hat. And yet the title of this is the Goddess of the Tree, because she's the one in charge. Because in the ancient world, the female was the tree. She was identified as the tree. And then of course you have the golden apples of the tree of the Hesperides in the Greek mythology. And this is probably from 800 to 500, something like that. The earlier Homer was probably the original. I say original, I don't mean original, I mean probably the earliest that we have as far as we have from literary means in the ancient West. You know, it doesn't go much before then. We're talking the Mesopotamian, Sumerian and all that. They had the cuneiform, and that goes way back. But that's not down south where Greece is. That's over between the Tigris and the Euphrates in modern Iraq. Actually, Iran and Iraq. So anyway, so there's another a sense from the ancient Middle East, the biblical area. This is Jean Markale, this particular book. This is Merlin, Priest of Nature. Markale has been a really terrific Celtic scholar, and he's quite good with the Celts. His materials are really spectacular. I've got his book on, well, the Merlin book. I've got his book, I think it's just right up above me somewhere there, on King Arthur, and there's various stuff on the Holy Grail that he talks about. Here's what I want to read. This is on page 117. Now he says, what Maxime de Tyre says may be debatable. He definitely attributes to the Celts a belief according to which the oak tree, now this is the Celts, to them, of course, in their particular climate, in their particular geographical location, the oak tree was prominent. That represented a divinity to them. It was solid, it was stalwart, it rose high into the sky, it gave them food, protection, shelter, warmth. Trees give us all this, so it was a perfect representation of divinity symbolically. Now this is like the Zen masters. What we can't do is what Joseph Campbell said. Our mistake that we make in our research is we concretize the metaphor. We take the symbol literally. And that's why it seems so stupid to us. Well, we're the stupid ones. You're not supposed to take it concretely. It's like the Zen master pointing his finger to the moon. You're not supposed to look at the finger. You're supposed to follow it to see what it is pointing at. It is pointing to reality. What we do is we end up sucking on the finger for comfort, and we miss the whole point of all of the ancient discourse on symbolism, spirituality, and religion, more or less. So we want to try to step back from that, try to get a broader, more realistic understanding, at least from the ancient point of view. If we want to try to understand them, then get out of your own stupid shoes and fit into theirs, right? But don't criticize them from our standards. You'll never grasp it. So anyway, and then what he said, because of its distinction and the strength of the oak has always been a ready image by which to convey the concept of divine omnipotence. And one comes across it frequently in Celtic legends and in that strange tradition expressed in the Welsh Cod Gadw, where the Britons are transformed by means of magic into trees, and because of that they are victorious over their enemies. Because a tree is like armor, you know. If you've seen any of these real big pine trees, or even the oak, I'm serious, some of the bark on some of those trees can get 8, 9, 10 inches thick. But some of my trees are like 3 and 4 inches thick. It is like an armor. So, oh, yes. Gotta go back here. Hold on. I'm getting ahead of myself. Other trees seem to have been honored by the Celts, of course, various different types. And the hazel, the tree of divination is always shown, is always used by dowsers, of course, the hazel. And then the apple tree. And it plays a significant role because it's the tree of paradise. This is the legend of the Genesis myth, right? The apple tree, Eve ate the apple and all that. The Jewish conception says it's a fig tree. But the fruit-bearing tree, this apple is the tree found on the magical isles where the heroes and the gods live, the Insula Pomorum of Geoffrey of Monmouth, the Isle of Abalum in ancient texts where Baltic amber is found, and the Emain Ablach of the Irish. And it is in the apple tree that we find Merlin in the poems attributed to him. Why? Because the legends say an apple tree invisible to regular mortals. And it was one of the things that helped make Merlin a legend, because he could be invisible. He used the apple tree to help him become invisible. kind of fun, isn't it? And then, of course, he has the, he took refuge in a yew tree also. And then Mark Hale says, it is a fact that the act of climbing a tree or staying in one is a ritual gesture that has numerous counterparts in shamanistic traditions. And I will definitely get into that with my paper. I said I was going to do 4. I better stop at 3. I'm kind of out of time. I'm going to try to keep these discussions on the intellectual videos between a half an hour and 45 minutes, because you need to, when we present ideas and all, we learned this in college decades ago, it's best to hear the idea, get the point of view, and then stop, step away, ponder it, think about it, etc. I will be back with a lot more about trees and the spiritual ramifications, the intellectual ramifications, the symbolic ideas. The interesting thing is, this is literally worldwide. We're very familiar with the tree of life and the tree of knowledge of good and evil because of the biblical materials in Genesis. This tree, this theme of trees of knowledge and trees of eternal life are in dozens of ancient cultures, but their tilt, their translation of the meaning of that is what is so fun to compare to the Genesis record, because they're not quite the same. And you get 8, 10, say a dozen different interpretations and views, and you begin to see a much, much more full, broad pattern than just the ancient Judaic one, or the ancient Mesopotamian one, or the early Christian one, or our boring one, the modern one, where we don't symbolize anything because we have become so gosh dang literal and concrete that we've lost the whole spiritual tradition. And I'll talk about that also. So anyway, thanks for joining me in my Backyard Professor intellectual videos. I think that's what I call it, intellectual, religious, whatever. The point is, we're going to study some very interesting ideas in all sorts of subjects. So, in the meantime, remember, and I can say this just like I do in my chess videos, be good to have fun, work hard, get plenty of rest. I promise, if you're young, you still want to get your rest, because it will catch you. So, thanks for watching my videos, and I will see you in the next Backyard Professor intellectual video.